Welcome. My name is Maria Emily Mayland. I'm originally from Norway, but now live here in Italy and study at the American School of Milan. In the past, women have often been stereotyped to be in the kitchen to cook food. However, now we see a movement towards what I believe to be gender equality. Over time, food production has reformed and adapted itself. But these changes must now come more fast to meet the demands of a rapidly growing and urbanizing population. Determined female changemakers who are unafraid to voice their own opinions on the food markets of our day are contributing to this much-needed change. Women have brought the pressing challenges of the food system to the public consciousness and are moving to solve these issues. Today, I'm honored to help introduce 8 such women who have not only shown passion, but are also paving the path for us all. Historically, female voices have been overshadowed, and therefore positive role models are necessary to help those women who have a lower voice than the rest. Being part of the social media generation, I'm lucky enough to daily get inspired by women who put their voices out there and make themselves heard. This had made me realize that women are active members in the food industry, and their input is vital for a more sustainable food systems for the generations to come. Collaboration by all, including the roughly 50% of the women around the world, will ensure a more secure and balanced future, where more variety of opinion can combine to form more constructive solutions. Together we are more. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Seeds and Chips 2018. My name's Morgan Oliveira. I'm the founder of Grounded PR, a PR firm in New York City focused on sustainable food companies. I'd like to invite everybody up from our panel today. We have Carrie Kennedy, Danielle Nierenberg, Sarah Tuomi, Renska Lind, Lucia Cercia, Natalie Shmulik, and Selena Jewell couldn't join us. I'm going to ask everybody if they can go down the line and give a brief summary about what you're working on in terms of women in food innovation before we get started.
Okay. My name is Carrie Kennedy.
Can you give her the microphone?
Here we go. My name's Carrie Kennedy, and I run Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. And we do 3 things in the area of food innovation. So one is we sue governments that are abusing human rights, and we've done quite a bit of work in Haiti on food programs there, which I'm happy to talk a little bit more about. Secondly, we work with the companies, the investment industry that's investing in companies that are producing food and getting them to think about the impact of human rights violations and right to food when they're making their investments. And then the third area that we work in is human rights education. And we teach students about the food industry and some of the human rights violations that are going on in the food industry and how they can create change, and I'm happy to talk about that as well. Thank you.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I guess now, everyone. My name is Dani Nierenberg. I am the president of Food Tank, which is a research and advocacy think tank devoted to really highlighting stories of hope and success in the food system. I'm so delighted to be on this stage with so many incredible women innovators. This doesn't happen often enough, that we have a panel entirely of women who are doing incredible things. Part of the work that I do is trying to amplify the work that these people do and the millions of women farmers around the world who are often invisible in the food system, and giving, with our food tank platform, helping amplify their voices so that they get more attention and ultimately more recent research and funding for the incredible work that they're doing. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sarah Toomey. I'm the CEO of Acacias for All. It's a social enterprise. We are setting sustainable value chains to fight desertification, poverty, and gender inequalities. So in very concrete words, we are planting trees to fight desertification with women and farmers to get a fair job. I'm also an advisor for the French president on climate issues and sustainable agriculture value chains.
Hi, everyone. Wow, that's loud. I'm Renska Lind. I run Food System 6, which is a nonprofit impact-focused accelerator that supports startups who are having a positive impact on the health and sustainability of our food system. I am proud to say that out of 23 portfolio companies and organizations that we support, 11 are female founders, and 4 of them are in hard tech. I think we'll have the opportunity to talk a little bit about the disparities in funding, in particular venture capital for female founders and female entrepreneurs. The statistics are pretty grim, but I'm excited that many of my fellow women here on stage are working diligently, and others in the world, to change that. So very much excited to be here and thankful for the opportunity and look forward to talking.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lucia. After many years working in big corporations, I fall in love with the world of entrepreneurial people, startups, even investors. And I decided to jump, to be on the other side of the table. And today I'm here as a managing partner of Jellify, that is a B2B platform to accelerate innovation for both those corporations who are looking for innovative solutions from startup ecosystems, and also for those startups that are already there but require specific support to scale up. And this scale up we call jellification.
Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Shmulik and I'm the CEO of the Hatchery Chicago. We're a nonprofit food and beverage incubator that are building one of the largest food business incubators in the country and one of the first to be built from the ground up. We're also building in a very underserved area on the west side of Chicago in East Garfield Park, which is a major food desert and has an incredibly high unemployment rate. So we work very closely with the community there to try to create jobs. We're anticipating 900 new jobs will be created in the first 5 years of opening. And then 70% of the companies we work with, the food startups and entrepreneurs, are female-owned businesses that we're there to support and help both with funding where possible, as well as resources and technical services.
Thank you so much. So today our topic is very broad, so I've broken it into a few different segments. And we're going to start off with entrepreneurship. Today more than ever, we have women going into food entrepreneurship. Danny, as someone who's been in this space a long time, why do you think that women are less apt than men to share their stories?
I think that women have been, really invisible in the food system for a long time. And so whether they've been working on farms or working in businesses or doing incredible advocacy and human rights work, their voices haven't been heard. I think that's changing. I think women now more than ever are voicing the work that they're doing and wanting to share their stories. And I just want to share one example of where I've seen that. A few years ago, I had this opportunity to meet with a group of 50 organic women farmers in India. And they were working together collectively on a farm and growing, again, organic crops, a lot of lentils and spices, and then selling it under their own brand at markets throughout urban areas outside of Ahmedabad, India. And I spend a lot of time walking around with this little notebook interrogating people. I interview hundreds of farmers all over the world. And after I'd finished asking them a lot of questions, they turned to me and started asking me questions. And they were particularly interested in what women farmers in other parts of the world were doing to combat things like climate change and what they were doing to market different crops. So I think as you give women the opportunity and the platform to voice their opinions, they become more comfortable with that and want to share the stories that they're doing and the successes that they're seeing so that others can learn from them.
Thank you. Natalie and others may want to add to this. There have never been more women starting food companies than there are today. Why do you think they have a hard time often being taken seriously by investors?
We see this quite often, and I think what happens is that oftentimes we've seen in the past that typically a lot of the CEOs or presidents of companies were men, and so traditionally we see investors in the space who have invested in these companies and potentially seen success or not seen success, but this is who they see in the forefront, which is not the case anymore. We've seen a lot of challenges come through. I've seen 3 companies in particular that were founded by women, and as soon as they got the right investors involved, the investors actually asked those women to step down to invite new CEOs who all ended up being men. So right now we're pushing to fight against that because there is something about women leaders that provides a specific type of ingenuity and collaboration, and we've seen more success from female-run companies right now than we've seen from any other businesses, and it's really remarkable the change that we're seeing. We see companies like Happy Baby, which turned into Happy Family and had an incredible acquisition that had 2 women-run partners, Lisa Curtis from Cully Cully right now, who's done remarkable work, but even she herself has said that in the investment space, she's often not taken seriously because she's young, she's a woman, and a lot of the investors say, well, she's cute, but she's not going to take the business to the next step, which is completely unfortunate because as we've seen, Kellogg's 1894 invested significantly, and that's a rapidly growing company. So while women haven't been taken seriously, I think we're fighting that much harder to really prove that not only are we capable, but we can excel in the industry so much more. And it's exciting now that we're able, through the hatchery, through this particular incubator, we are a 4-person team, 3 women, and we are there to work with these companies. We see more women investors coming forward, which is incredible. We see women investors who are collaborating. We recently partnered with a women-run investment group where one of the women leaders actually said she used to be the single female investor in a VC, and every time she raised her hand, nobody would choose her. So she would sit there for an hour holding her hand up to try to provide some input, and she wasn't taken seriously. So she started her own and now is doing very, very well in the space. So those are the kinds of things that we love to see and hope to see more of.
Thanks. Something that we're seeing a lot now that we haven't seen in the past is collaboration with big companies and small ones. In the past, we'd often see large companies just buy up the little guys. I have one client that's a 30-person startup, and they just started a big partnership with Whole Foods and Home Depot. Why do you think, Lucia, we're seeing this kind of collaboration that we haven't seen in the past?
Yes, here I'm still an hybrid animal because till 3 months ago I was innovation head of a big corporation, and now I am a small startup, a small entrepreneurial person. So I think that we can make the difference as people, okay, first of all, and also as manager of corporation and as entrepreneurial people and probably startups. But there is a gap, and we have to be honest about it. From one side, what I see corporations, big or small, looking for innovation, and they claim about it. They are hungry about innovation. And they understood that open innovation exists, and they started to create a dialogue with small startups, small entrepreneurial people. They fall in love with them, you know, but then they discover they are not perfect. Of course, they are startups. They are building their journey. They are not ready, packaged to be used. But they see gaps that represent barriers for them to work with them. It's an issue. It's a big barrier. It's a risk for innovation. Guys, uncertainty is part of the game. When I was in this corporation, it's not a secret, it's Electrolux Group. When I was in Electrolux, I tried to describe to my colleagues that it's part of the game, it's part of innovation. Not just the management of the risk, that is normal management, but the understanding of the gaps of the startups and the delivery of new activities to cover the gaps. And this is the message for corporation. I don't know whether we have here in the audience. On the other side, we have startups, and they have to build their journey. I used to meet these entrepreneurial people telling me, you know, I have the money, but they have to convince a software engineer to join my company. But how can I convince somebody working in a big company, safe position, leaving this company and joining my small, unknown startups? That's reality. That's reality. And to be honest, I see this gap, not just at the beginning when you have a small startup trying to build their path, but in the second step, when they need to scale up. I used to say in Jellify when I need to move from liquid to solid, so to be jellified. So I think that we need to change the way as an ecosystem, we need to change the way we collaborate. Corporations, they shouldn't just look at startup as potential teams to be acquired. Acquisition is something good, okay, of course, but it is not the only solution, the only way, the only exit strategy, okay? Collaboration, okay, co-development, do a project together, taking the risk together is one way. And startups should understand that they should be honest. You're not, when you are in front of investors, usually you feel like at school. You need to be ready to answer to all the questions, otherwise you don't get the money. Actually, be honest. Tell your gaps. I am strong here I need support. Be honest, because sooner or later the gaps will come out. Be honest and you will find somebody who can help you to make your idea happen. So I think this is the only way to create collaboration in a real way, not just M&A.
Thank you. And bridging off of collaboration, Renska, obviously by collaborating we could see women helping each other. Do you think we're seeing this, or do you think there's a lack in women entrepreneurs collaborating and supporting each other in this space?
I think there's a lot to build on here that my fellow panelists have said. I think we're starting to see some changes in leadership. To Natalie's point, we're starting to see more female investors being willing to lean into a very different style of investing. Females, I myself am an investor, and I know that I operate and think very differently than my male counterparts. And so that role model and that mentorship, I think, and the recognition amongst us that we need to be giving back to the next generation of entrepreneurs. So there's something that was just started called femalefounders.org. And the whole point of that is to really disrupt this paradigm of the fact that women are getting, depending on the statistics that you can see, anywhere between 10 and 15% of venture capital, and the fact that only 8% of venture capital funds are currently managed by women. So that is, I think, a very important step in this direction. I think to Lucia's point about collaboration and about the difference, I think there's a different power dynamic that's happening right now. The shift is, and maybe that is a little bit about women taking more of their voice and taking more of their powership, that's not a word, their leadership and their power to change what that dynamic looks like. I do think that the broader industry and the trends are also shifting in such a way that I heard one entrepreneur say it used to be that if you were a startup and you sold out to a big company, that was the way that it was perceived, and it's very different now. It's way more about selling in. So startups, innovators who have those incredible supply chains and that customer connection and that authenticity, like that's really valuable. And I think Big Food has learned some really valuable lessons along the way that there's more to the acquisition, to your point, more than that. That's at play. And so I think there are things that are changing and shifting that give me anyway, a lot of hope.
Thank you. This last one in this kind of segment, I want to open up to the whole panel for anyone that has thoughts on this. How do you think, or do you think, the Me Too movement has impacted women in the food space? Anybody have thoughts? You can turn the mic.
Yeah, sorry. I think that Me Too is impacting women across the board, and I can't really speak about Europe, but I can say in the United States that there's a real sea change. I think that women now feel much more empowered to stand up and speak out when they see abuse in the workplace, and the fact that Bill Cosby was just, found guilty and will spend the rest of his life in prison is vitally important. But the most important part about that case is that 5 women were allowed to testify, so that it created a pattern, and that's really what's prevented these guilty findings from being successful in the past. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the work of the Coalition of Immokalee Workers. This is a group of farm workers in South Florida, which over the last 15 years has successfully prosecuted 8 cases of slavery in the United States and freed over 1,500 slaves. It's pretty extraordinary. A lot of those people were women. And the agriculture industry across the board around the world has one of the highest rates of abuse of women of all the industries on earth. It's in the US and in many other countries, it's endemic that women are sexually assaulted and that women have to have sex in order to be hired for jobs. And the CIW, this small group of farm workers in South Florida, has basically wiped out, completely stopped sexual assault in the workplace in the agriculture industry, which is extraordinary. And they did it using a methodology that can be transferred to any industry almost any industry on earth, certainly any industry that has a supply chain. It's now being looked at, as a matter of fact, by the Academy of Motion Pictures, which is what gives out the Academy Awards in Hollywood as a model. And basically what it is a worker-led social responsibility. So they bring all the workers in an industry together. This particular industry was the farm workers. And they said, what do you need to feel safe on your job? And people threw out everything they needed. And they gathered all that together and they said, okay, this is our code of conduct. This is what has to happen. Then they agreed that they would train all the workers once a month, paid training for each worker in the industry. And then they went to the big companies that were buying the tomatoes from those workers, so Walmart and a lot of the big grocery chains, McDonald's, Burger King, etc. And they got them to agree that they would only buy tomatoes from the farms that had this worker-driven social responsibility. And it's worked. They have inspectors. For the first 3 years, they had lots of complaints, and they prosecuted those people, and they held them accountable. And now for the last 2 years, they've had almost no complaints at all.
Wow.
So it's an amazing program, and it's transformed how women at the very, very bottom of the food industry are treated.
Can I just add to that for
Sure,
a second?
yeah.
I think that participatory method of doing that is so important, and that's something that women sort of thrive on, whether they're farmers or agricultural workers or investors and innovators. And I think that's something that's very different than how men in this space collaborate, because you don't have that kind of ground up rising of influencers to make a whole industry change. That's phenomenal. And in a similar fashion, Rock United, which is the Restaurant Opportunity Center, they work with women who, are women food workers, waitresses, cooks who are continually, abused in the workplace. Many of us on this stage probably started our careers in the food industry as waitresses or others, and I know that it's rampant. And so making sure that women, especially undocumented and immigrant women, have a voice in restaurants and fast food chains all over the world is really increasingly important, and they have a lot to learn from what's been done by the Immokalee workers and others, but Rock United is just such a phenomenal organization really leading that fight.
Thank you. Carrie, you kind of took us into our next segment, which I want to talk about, which is NGOs and agriculture. You mentioned something yesterday to me about the chocolate industry and around education around that. Do you want to talk some more about that?
Sure. So at RFK Human Rights, we teach students kindergarten through law school about human rights, what they are and how they can create change. So I thought I'd share one of the lesson plans that we do all over the world, particularly here in Italy. We're in every province of every region of this country. So we have a richer penetration in Italy than any other country. But this is a lesson plan that's taught to 12-year-olds. So when you're 12 years old, you learn something called language arts. When I was a kid, it was called English, but now it's called language arts. And you have to learn poetry. So we give the students 2 or 3 articles about the manufacture of chocolate. So 70% of the chocolate consumed here in the EU is made by children who are in slavery or child labor producing that chocolate. And that comes as a shock to most students, as I'm sure it comes to most people in this audience. So we give the kids those 2 or 3 articles, and then they have to write a poem from the perspective of the child in child labor. So they're learning text analysis, they're learning social emotional learning, empathy, and then they're learning poetry because it's in iambic pentameter. A few weeks later, they have to do expository writing. So we give them the same articles, and then we give them the name and address of the CEOs of Godiva and Hershey's and Cadbury. And then they have to write a letter to each of those CEOs saying, here's the problem, and demanding a change. So again, it's text analysis, it is social emotional learning because they're learning to take something that was an emotional issue and translate that into an advocacy piece, very important in all our relationships. And then they're also learning how to write a business letter. Where does the stamp go? Where does the return address go, et cetera. A few weeks after that is the last part of this particular lesson plan. We give them a 5x8 card, and they have to write the problem in one sentence, consolidate their thoughts. And they write that sentence, and then they say, there's a solution, and it's fair trade chocolate. And they scotch tape a piece of fair trade chocolate to that card. And then at Halloween, they do reverse trick or treat. So whenever somebody gives them a piece of chocolate, they say, thank you very much, and then they hand them the card. And through that series of steps, the kids start to think of themselves as a human rights defender. And that's transformative, because really the difference between a victim or a bystander is activism. So it's showing kids that they don't have to stand back or worry about overwhelming problems all over the world, that they have a role to play in creating change. And that sense of activism is very empowering in all parts of their lives. And that's an example of the
That's
work
great.
we do.
I love that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sarah, I was reading something you wrote in preparation for the panel about women farmers, and digging into that, read that there's almost the same amount as women and men in agriculture, but the pay gap is ridiculously huge. You said specifically in Tunisia, 80% of women farmers are unpaid. Can you go into this a little bit more?
Yes, it's a very sad truth, is that 80% of women farmers in Tunisia are unpaid. So you have to know, in Tunisia, the women are the ones who are cooking, they are the ones who are producing food. And most of the time, they work for free for the family, so they never see the money of their job. And even when the 20% who are paid workers, they are paid half of the price of men workers, which is absolutely insane. But this is a reality, and it's not just in Tunisia, it's all over the world like that. And when I started my social enterprise, Acacias for All, the aim was to find a solution for these women, to empower them in a way that they become entrepreneurs. And because I really believe that these women, they have a knowledge, they have a traditional knowledge on farming, they know very well how to grow the food, but they are not empowered. And what they need is just tools. It's tools, what kind of tools? It's techniques, innovative techniques like we know like technologies. Now we use IoT, we use permaculture trainings, but also access to funding and access to market. And this is exactly what we are doing through Access for All by giving them trees, giving them access to irrigation systems, trainings, and access to market. Because we cannot, in the 21st century now, continue to accept that our food is grown at the bottom of the chain, made by women who are unpaid or paid in an unfairness way.
Thank you. Danny, at Food Tank, I was reading a piece yesterday, and in 2015, it said 66% of the world's work falls on women's shoulders, yet according to Oxfam, they only earn 10% of the world's wages, and by world's income, and that by giving these women the same access to resources, we could reduce the number of hungry people by 100 to 115 million. Can you tell us more about this?
Absolutely, and I can just build on what Sarah just described. You know, women make up about half of the world's agricultural labor force, roughly 43%. In some countries, as many as 80% of farmers are women. And they don't get access to important resources like land, education, extension services, the whole range of things that are often available to male farmers simply because they're men. And so we have a real opportunity, though, to flip that, because according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, if women had those same access to resources as male farmers, they could increase yields by 20 to 30% and lift as many as 200 million people out of hunger. And so I think we're really ignoring women in the food system at our own peril. And a few years ago, the former UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Olivier de Schutter, who's one of my heroes, he said, you know, women need equality, obviously, in agriculture, but they need it in all aspects of their lives. And to really, you know, narrow that pay gap, to make sure that they're respected and considered equal, so that we don't keep having panels like this one encouraging people to recognize that women are producing the world's food, that they're investors, that they're entrepreneurs, that it's 2018. We shouldn't be having this discussion.
I want to open another one up to the panel. How can we help women in other countries so that are not in the position that we are? So how do we help them that are not getting the education, that are not getting food? What is the most effective way? Is it money? Is it time? Carrie, I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, but anyone that wants to jump in, what is the best thing we as people in our position can do to help?
Well, I'd like to just pick up on a discussion at the beginning of this panel about where the money is. Mm-hmm. So right now, the investment industry, that's private equity and others, is a $77 trillion industry. $77 trillion. Of that, 2% of it is controlled by a combination of women and people of color. Think about that. We are completely denied access to that capital. In the United States, let me give you an example. So we did a survey of the 30 largest university endowments in our country. So that's Harvard, it's Yale, it's Stanford, it's Duke, all the big universities. And we asked them, how much of your university endowment is invested by women and minority-owned firms? So this is not investing in women-owned businesses. This is giving women the capital to go invest for you, okay? So the answer came back 1.1%. These are universities that a core value is equality. A core value is bringing multiple voices to the table, and yet 99% of their money is invested by old white men. Nothing is going to dramatically change. On this panel, these panels will go on forever, as long as old white men continue to control virtually all the resources in our world. That's what we have to change. And that's one of the things we're working on at RFK Human Rights.
Yes, and I think that, okay, I grew up, okay, as a mechanical engineer in a total male environment in different companies, from aerospace to others. I was not in a team of very few women. I was really the only one. And I think the only way to make change, not as a woman, honestly, as a human being, is to be transparent. If I don't understand, I tell. If I disagree, I tell. And I don't think that I risk to be unpolite, because I've been educated by my family. I can simply be open, but transparent. If you're transparent in every single moment of our life about what we think, about what we want to do, about our dreams, I think we can do a change in the daily life, in the small things. That's, I think, that can have an impact.
Thank you. So I would just, to build on both of these incredibly important points, I think that willingness to be vulnerable and to be transparent about uncertainty is not currently accepted in most, at least from where I sit, investor conversations. So I think as we're starting to see the rise of impact investing, which is something that's important for everybody in this room to pay attention to, I do think that there's an opportunity to really lean into some of these the more complex dimensions of capital. But I do think that is, many of the female founders that I support and that I invest in have had the experience where they've shared their story and it has been completely dismissed. So unless and until we have women like the people on this stage and others out there in the field that are leading some changes, leaning in to actually hear about those parts of the story. As an early stage investor, I'm all about the story. Anybody who works with entrepreneurs know that this is the case. What is it that is going to get you up and out of bed every single day? What is going to motivate you to push down all the roadblocks? That is inherently and intrinsically about story and passion and vision and motivation. But those are attributes and characteristics that we need to continue to lift up and pull out because they aren't currently a part of the standard investment discourse.
Thank you. Sarah, do you want to? Just to touch upon all that as well, because I think these points are so powerful. And I think the investment piece in particular, where we see money going, there are high-risk investments that exist in this world. We see extremely high-risk investments. And yet sometimes investing in a benefit corporation or a women-run business is somehow seen as more high risk, which I find so bizarre at times. And I think to go back to your question on how can we help other women around the world as well, through the entrepreneurs we work with, that's something we encourage. We started including programming right now that actually talks about sustainability. It talks about benefit corporation and how you can give back, whether it's things like reducing food waste or supporting farmers and specialists in agriculture around the world. We work with a company right now called Rumi Spice. It's a women-owned company. The CEO, Kimberly, actually she was in the army. She went to Afghanistan and she found that particularly women farmers were growing opium. It was an extremely dangerous place to be. And she found that they had some of the best saffron in the world. And what she did was she started a company which basically now runs is one of the highest saffron producers in Afghanistan right now and sells this saffron throughout the country and the world and supports particularly female farmers who were forced to make a fraction of what they're currently making growing opium and basically being abused. And so there are so many, and this is again going back to the power of, I think, women entrepreneurs is it's so much more than just, it's growing a successful business. These are incredibly smart businesswomen, but they're also looking for ways to give back. And we see so much of that right now, and we're trying to provide that additional support. But the investment side is still such a big challenge because even for her, trying to get investments, investors keep saying, well, you're paying these farmers so much money and you're not making that money in return. We don't want to invest in a business like this. So I absolutely agree that it's where the money goes. It's absolutely where the money goes.
Thank you. And one more question before we open it up to a little Q&A. What are some of the female-run companies that maybe we're not hearing about, maybe the press isn't writing about, that we should know about, that the audience should know about, that we should be looking at and being excited about? Anybody, please jump in.
I think the one I mentioned earlier, Lisa Curtis with Kuli Kuli. I think Kuli Kuli is doing amazing things with moringa, and she's really a powerful entrepreneur, very humble. But there's so many like her too. There's so many, I can't even think of some right now. But definitely Kuli Kuli is doing amazing things. Anyone else?
Again, it's a tough question because we have, like I said, 11 female founders in our portfolio. But one that we're excited about all of them, but one is called Pasture Map, which is being led by a woman that is digitizing the livestock management field, which is providing an opportunity for a transition to more sustainable and regenerative livestock practices in a very undigitized segment of the supply chain. There's also a number of incredible female founders in the food waste space that we support one of them. It's a company called Renewal Mill, and they're working with the byproduct of soy and tofu production to turn it into an upcycled, high value add flour alternative for baking that has a much denser nutritional profile. So there's more. Happy to talk.
Thanks. Danny, any you guys are looking at on Food Tank?
A lot of the ones already.
Okay. All right. Unless anybody has any last thoughts, I'm going to open it up to some Q&A with the audience. All right. No questions? Do we have a microphone? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ayesha Veriu. I'm from Advancement for Rural Kids, and we partner with rural farmers on a 5-cent vegetable and protein lunch that gets kids back to school and create income for the community. I think, Carrie, you had talked about the 2% of capital that women have access to or control. In the funds that, for those who are running funds, and also for those who have raised capital, who have you raised most of the capital from in terms of men and women? And also, for those who focus on investing in women, what are your investors or your general partners looking for in terms of return in your funds?
I don't know whether I have the answer, but I tell you what I see. So I want to share you the reality. We have in our vision and mission also the ambition to make a change for women entrepreneurship. But I want to be honest, since we invest mainly on disruptive technologies, I have to be honest, looking at startups, we don't have any women. So we want to invest, but we don't find. So we would like to find startups with high-level technologies, but there are no women inside. So I think that the point is at another level. Now we are investing a lot of our time, of course pro bono, in high school to educate in a totally different way the culture, not just of the people at school, but of their family. Because the point is that why they don't do engineering instead of, I don't know, something different. That's the point. So I'm sorry I'm not able to give you the answer, but this is the situation that we see.
I'm on the board of a company called Brava, B-R-A-V-A, and it's a private equity company that invests sustainably, ESG compliant, and in companies that not only are that are run by women, but also are primarily benefiting women. So Brava. And it has to make a market rate of return or better.
Anyone else? Over here?
Hi everyone, my name is Becca and I'm the co-founder of an ed tech startup, and we're exhibiting here. And something that I've struggled with is addressing, even in our startup, what an injustice towards women looks like with our interns or with the other women that we're bringing onto the team, like a priority for specifically like just younger men and the skill sets that they have and that they're providing. And it's really difficult for me as a co-founder to be that advocacy voice, but then also be advocating for myself at the same time. So it's managing a lot that way. And then also in our incubators and our accelerators, it isn't something that's being brought up in the education to all of the startups. It just isn't mentioned as much. So I'd love to hear like experiences or stories or best practices on how to grow companies from the very, very beginning that are conscientious of women as an asset.
I'd be happy to talk. I'd be happy to talk offline about this, but we have been, and I know Natalie spoke to this as well in terms of how they're thinking about integrating this into their programming, but we also do a lot of education on diversity, equity, and inclusion, more broadly speaking. So as a part of participating in our program, which we believe and have heard is extraordinarily high value for our companies, they also are exposed to a range of thinking around how they as entrepreneurs are able to make broader change in the world. So we are all about supporting the trajectory of their business and their success, but we also believe that there is an obligation that the future business leaders be future food movement leaders and to be really aware and sensitive to everything that's happening. And this obviously bears direct relevance on supply chain and all of the things that we've talked about today. So I will tell you, it is not easy. We have had several awkward conversations in our cohort where these are concepts that are literally being raised for the first time. The challenge is to take theory and make it actionable. So we actually also partner with people who can come in and help our startups figure out how they can operationalize some of this in their hiring and in their board development. This is, to your point, this is extremely challenging work because we are not only suggesting that we know what a difficult path it is to go from startup to successful company, but we believe and we have the vision and the viewpoint that these are going to be the absolute, these are going to be what is demanded of business as it moves forward. But happy to share more, and I'm sure.
No, exactly. That's spot on. We actually started to run in our curriculum company culture classes, and I highly recommend it because company culture is already inclusive, and it's about not just the women, because sometimes we also need to be careful about being, isolating one group. And so in this way, it involves everything. It involves how to be better communicators, how to identify each other's strengths. And that's about everybody. It's not looking at gender. It's looking at your group as a team and how to work together. And we ourselves as an incubator, I recently just hired a leadership coach who's a woman, and we know we need help. So even for myself as a female leader, I've been reaching out to people and some of our founders and said, how did you reach success? So we were connected up and we started with this leadership group. So finding a third-party organization that might be able to contribute to your team and provide outside perspective, because it is challenging sometimes when you're so in the heart of it, to speak out and to try to define what might be causing some of the challenges. Whereas if you bring an outside perspective in at times and have them work with you, work with the team, work with the startups, it really adds a lot of value. But we see that shift. The most successful companies in the industry right now have built incredible company culture. We heard that with Starbucks yesterday. It's all about getting your team to work together. That's the only way to achieve that success.
I will add actually to that. I think I worked at a big startup very early on. I think a lot of startups wait too long to bring in an HR person, and so I would not wait too long because I think that's an important resource for your employees to have. Anyone else? Only 2 people? Right here? Oh, right there. In the back.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wilma Mondlane. I am Mozambican. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the panel for bringing this, for sharing this reality of women in business. So, we in Mozambique, we have a kind of a very, very similar problem as the one that was shared by Sarah in Tunisia, in a sense that right now we have the majority of the people, or the farmers, will be women that are producing the food and everything. And what we face right now is that even if we try to empower those women, to support them, to train them and to coach them in order for them to be able to be in business, producing and owning the money for themselves, the moment they go home, that money has to be shared with the man. And sometimes what the man does is to ask for the entire profit of that the woman was made, and then at the same time, it how can I say? It puts a lot of weight on the back of the woman, in the sense that doesn't matter if you're running a business, doesn't matter if you're bringing food to the table, but you still have to be a woman in the house. So right now we are looking for support to see if we can maximize if we can maximize awareness to these women, but also to their men, like in the sense that they should be able to take care of the family, but also they should be able to run the business regardless of anything. If the man is the most important person culturally. So we have a few companies we brought to this FIDA. We have about 6 companies producing in the agribusiness sectors with different projects. And one of the projects, it's more related to the renewable energy side, whereby we have created this micro-gasification gas stove. And what we do with this is we give to women to sell it to other women. But of course, sometimes we just get to face with some problems, financial problems, in the sense that it's not that easy to create a business for women if you don't have support for projects like this, right? So I just wanted to share
Thank you so much
with you this part of our experience.
Thank you. And I'm afraid we're out of time.
Can I just quickly respond to that? Which is that you might look at Mohammed Yunus as a model, because he ran into many of these same issues in Bangladesh. And when women started to get any income and dealing with the men in their lives. So it's a very, very complicated thing to grapple with, and he's very smart about it. So take a look.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our panel today. It's a really great job. And thank you to everybody for coming. Hope you learned a little bit, and enjoy the rest of the conference.